Your mind can become your greatest weapon or your greatest enemy, and most people never realize which one they're living with. Every day, millions of people wake up already losing a battle they never chose. They open their eyes, and before their feet touch the floor, the mind has already whispered fear, doubt, comparison, and regret. Negative thinking spreads quietly through the news you scroll, the memories you rehearse, the problems you magnify, and the stories you tell yourself about who you are. And without noticing, you become a prisoner of your own thoughts. But the Stoics taught a different way, that your mind is not a cage, it is a tool, one you can sharpen, discipline, and command. Today, you and I are going to break the loop. We're diving into 8 Stoic laws that can kill negative thinking at its root and rebuild your inner strength from the inside out. Stay with me. Your mind deserves this fight. Law 1. Stop trusting every thought you have. Negative thinking doesn't begin with a disaster, a rejection, or a bad day. It begins with something far quieter, the moment you treat every thought in your mind as if it were absolute truth. Most people never realize this is the trap. The mind produces random impressions constantly, some based on fear, some on memory, some on insecurity, and some on pure imagination. But because those thoughts come from inside us, we assume they must mean something. We let them shape our mood, our confidence, our decisions, even our identity. The Stoics warned against this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind will show you endless pictures, stories, fears, and impulses, but you are the one who chooses which ones get to stay. To him, a thought was not a command. It was an impression that needed to be inspected, questioned, and filtered. Negative thinking grows strong only when you accept impressions without challenging them. Think about how many times you've reacted to something that wasn't even real, assuming someone is upset with you, imagining failure before trying, predicting worst-case scenarios, replaying a conversation until it becomes a threat in your head. None of these events exist. They only live in the way you interpret them. Modern life makes this even harder. We are overstimulated, rushed, anxious, and constantly comparing ourselves. This mental noise weakens the gap between thought and truth. Without Stoic discipline, your mind becomes a narrator you can't trust, one that exaggerates danger, magnifies small problems, and convinces you that the worst explanation must be the right one. And the more you let those thoughts go unchecked, the more power they gain. But when you challenge a thought, you reclaim control. Ask yourself, is this a fact or a fear, evidence or imagination, reality or projection? This simple pause interrupts the automatic loop of negativity. It gives your rational mind time to catch up. The moment you separate thoughts from truth, they lose their grip on you. You begin to see them for what they are. Stories, not realities, suggestions, not orders. This is where Stoicism becomes a weapon. Once you learn to observe thoughts instead of obey them, your inner world becomes stable again. You stop reacting to illusions. You stop carrying fears that never belonged to you. And you stop letting your mind talk you out of the life you're supposed to live. Your first step to killing negative thinking is simple but powerful. Don't believe everything you think. Law 2. Name your emotions before they control you. Negative thinking becomes dangerous the moment your emotions take the wheel, before your mind even wakes up. Most people don't realize this. An emotion you don't name becomes a reaction you can't control. When something triggers you, a harsh comment, a cold text, a misunderstanding, a sudden silence, your mind doesn't respond with logic first. It responds with a surge. Anger, insecurity, fear, shame, disappointment, jealousy, resentment. And because you don't pause to identify what you're feeling, you assume the emotion itself is the truth. You assume the worst interpretation must be the correct one. Stoics understood this psychological trap long before psychology existed. Epictetus taught that emotions are not enemies, they are signals. But a signal is only useful if you can read it. When you fail to recognize what you're feeling, the emotion becomes the narrator of your story. It colors your perception of people, events, and even your own worth. Naming an emotion doesn't make it disappear, it makes it visible. And once something is visible, it becomes manageable. Think about how often emotional confusion leads to negative thoughts. Someone ignores your message and your mind leaps to rejection. A friend sounds short on the phone and you assume they're angry. A mistake at work turns into a spiral of self-criticism within minutes. But behind each of these reactions is not truth. It's an unnamed emotion. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's fear of judgment. Maybe it's embarrassment disguised as anger. Without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks with the darkest possible conclusion. Stoicism teaches a simple, powerful discipline. Observe first, interpret later. The moment you feel a rush, tight chest, fast heartbeat, heat in your face, sudden irritation, pause. Don't react. Don't text. Don't send an email. Don't defend yourself. Identify what you feel with one honest word. This is anxiety. This is disappointment. This is frustration. This is insecurity. The act of naming the emotion separates you from the feeling. It creates a thin but critical distance, enough for logic to re-enter the room. Modern psychology agrees. Labeling emotions reduces their intensity and gives the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, a chance to regain control. This is exactly what the Stoics practiced long before science proved it. By naming your emotions, you prevent them from hijacking your thoughts. This law is simple but transformative. When you identify the emotion, you diffuse it. And when you regain ownership of your internal state, negative thinking loses its momentum. Remember this every time you feel overwhelmed or reactive. Label it to tame it. Law 3. Expect discomfort so it doesn't break you. Negative thinking thrives in one specific environment, the gap between what you expect life to be and what life actually is. When you expect smoothness, comfort, predictability, and constant emotional safety, the smallest disruption feels like a catastrophe. A delayed message becomes rejection. A mistake becomes failure. A stressful day becomes, my life is falling apart. You aren't actually overwhelmed by the event. You're overwhelmed by the shock of it. The Stoics eliminated this shock. They understood a fundamental truth. Life is unpredictable, and most pain comes from refusing to accept this. Marcus Aurelius practiced a ritual every morning. Before leaving his bed, he reminded himself that he would encounter selfish people, emotional people, rude people, unfair people, and chaotic situations. Not because he was cynical, but because he was prepared. When the world acted like the world, he wasn't rattled. He wasn't surprised, and because he wasn't surprised, he didn't collapse into negativity. Expectation is the mental armor most people never build. When you assume things should go your way, every difficulty feels like a personal attack. But when you expect obstacles, setbacks become information, not tragedies. Discomfort becomes training, not punishment. Instead of spiraling into negative thoughts, you see adversity as a natural part of the human experience. Nothing more, nothing less. Think about the last time something went wrong. Maybe someone canceled plans last minute. Maybe your boss criticized your work. Maybe your partner was distant. Maybe your car broke down. The frustration didn't come only from the event. It came from the belief that things weren't supposed to go that way. That belief, your expectation, was the real source of your negative thinking. Stoicism teaches a life-changing mental discipline called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortune. You take 60 seconds to visualize what could realistically go wrong today, not in a dramatic or fearful way, but in a calm, grounded, stoic way. traffic, delays, mistakes, miscommunication, rejection, inconvenience. By imagining these possibilities, you soften their emotional impact. When they happen, your mind doesn't panic. It recognizes them. You think, ah, there it is. I knew something like this could happen. And immediately, you respond with control instead of chaos. This practice doesn't make you negative. It makes you resilient. It shrinks the power of surprise, and surprise is what fuels negative thinking. When you expect discomfort, you stop taking every inconvenience personally. Your emotional world becomes steadier, your reactions become wiser, and your mind becomes harder to break. Carry this law with you. Prepared minds don't panic. Law 4. Detach from what you can't control. Negative thinking often begins where your sense of control ends. The human mind suffers most when it tries to command things that were never meant to obey it. Other people's opinions, outcomes, timing, opportunities, fairness, or how the world responds to your effort. The more you cling to these external variables, the more helpless you feel. And helplessness is the perfect breeding ground for anxiety, frustration, and self-doubt. Stoicism draws a clean, sharp line through this chaos. According to Epictetus, everything in life falls into one of two categories: what is within your control and what is not. Your thoughts, choices, actions, effort, character, and judgments are yours. Everything else, reactions, results, whether traffic, delays, other people's decisions, other people's moods, is not. Negative thinking emerges when you blur that line, when you take responsibility for what isn't yours and abandon responsibility for what is. Think about how often this happens. You worry about whether someone likes you. You obsess over whether a plan will work. You replay conversations hoping to edit the past. You fear being misunderstood. You want people to approve, admire, validate, appreciate. When those expectations aren't met, your mind spirals. But the spiral doesn't come from the situation. It comes from the illusion that you could have controlled it in the first place. Detachment is not indifference. It is not apathy or emotional withdrawal. Stoic detachment means this: I will give my best effort to what I can control and release everything else without resentment. It's a mental discipline, a form of emotional hygiene that keeps your inner world clean. When you practice this, the noise around you loses its power. External chaos stays external. Here's a simple exercise. When your mind begins to worry, ask one question: is this mine? If the answer is no, stop carrying it. If the answer is yes, act on it. This single question simplifies your entire emotional life. It turns vague stress into clear responsibility. It cuts the root of negative thinking by removing the weight you are never meant to hold. Detachment gives you freedom. Without it, every setback feels like a personal failure. With it, setbacks become neutral events you respond to with clarity instead of panic. Without it, people's moods control you. With it, you stay grounded regardless of how others behave. Without it, outcomes define you. With it, your identity comes from effort and virtue, not applause. Carry this law everywhere you go. Control the controllables. Release the rest. Law 5. Rewrite the story you tell yourself. Negative thinking is rarely about what actually happened. It's about the story you attach to what happened. Two people can experience the same event: rejection, failure, criticism, loss, and walk away, with completely different interpretations. One person sees it as proof that they're not enough. The other sees it as a challenge to grow. The event is the same, but the internal story transforms everything. And most of the suffering you carry comes from a story you never questioned. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Epictetus wrote, "You are disturbed not by events, but by your views about them." In other words, the event is neutral. You add the meaning. But when your mind already leans toward negativity, the meaning becomes distorted. You fall into narrative traps where small setbacks become personal indictments, and ordinary difficulties become evidence that life is stacked against you. Think about the stories you've told yourself recently. I failed because I'm not smart enough. They didn't respond because they don't care. If something went wrong, it must be my fault. I always ruin things. These narratives feel true because they've been repeated so many times, but repetition is not proof. A thought doesn't become reality just because it returns often, and yet your mind holds on to these stories as if they are sacred truth. Rewriting your internal story doesn't mean lying to yourself. It means choosing interpretations that align with reality, virtue, and growth rather than fear. When something painful happens, instead of collapsing into the usual script, pause and rewrite it. This happened for me, not to me. This setback is instruction, not punishment. Their reaction reveals them, not me. I can learn from this without destroying myself. These new narratives don't erase discomfort, but they stop it from poisoning your identity. The stories you tell yourself shape your confidence, your decisions, and your emotional resilience. If your internal narrative is harsh and unforgiving, you will live in a world that feels harsh and unforgiving. But if your internal narrative is grounded in clarity and discipline, you become someone who interprets challenges as opportunities rather than threats. Stoicism invites you to become the narrator of your life, not a passive character. You choose the meaning, you choose the frame, you choose the interpretation that leads to strength rather than suffering. This is how you kill negative thinking at its core, by taking back authorship of your internal world. Remember this: change the story and you change the outcome. Law 6. Build a mind fortified by discipline. Negative thinking doesn't only come from emotional wounds or past experiences. It also grows in weak, undisciplined mental environments. A scattered mind becomes a fearful mind. A chaotic routine creates a chaotic inner world. When your life lacks structure, your thoughts fill the empty space with worst-case scenarios, insecurities, and imagined problems. Discipline isn't just about productivity or habits. It's about protecting your mental landscape from drifting into darkness. The Stoics viewed discipline as a form of inner architecture. Marcus Aurelius woke up every day with a routine of writing, reflection, and preparation. Seneca practiced voluntary hardship to build resilience long before challenges arrived. Epictetus grounded himself in daily self-examination so his mind wouldn't wander into ungoverned territory. They understood that a disciplined life creates a disciplined mind, and a disciplined mind rarely collapses into negativity. Look closely at your own routines. When your sleep schedule is inconsistent, your thoughts become anxious. When you don't move your body, your emotions stagnate. When you consume too much social media, your self-worth erodes. When your environment is messy, your mind mirrors the chaos. Negative thinking thrives wherever structure is absent. It grows in the cracks of your day. The idle moments, the scroll holes, the late-night spirals, the unchecked impulses. Stoic discipline isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. It's choosing small, intentional actions that strengthen your mental foundation. This can mean creating a morning ritual that sets your tone, carving out time for reflection, limiting exposure to noise, or committing to one difficult task each day. Discipline shrinks the mental space where negativity hides. Instead of living reactively, you live with direction. Instead of drifting, you anchor yourself. Modern science backs this up. Routines reduce decision fatigue, calm the nervous system, and increase a sense of control. 3 factors that drastically reduce negative thought loops. Your brain feels safer when it knows what to expect, and a safe brain is a clearer brain. Building a disciplined mind also means honoring your promises to yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and actually follow through, you strengthen your identity. You become someone you trust, and a person who trusts themselves does not spiral easily into fear or self-criticism. This law isn't glamorous, but it might be the most important. You cannot kill negative thinking with hope alone. You kill it with structure, habit, and self-respect repeated daily. A disciplined mind becomes a fortress, one that negativity struggles to enter. Hold on to this truth. A disciplined mind rarely suffers. Law 7. Stop feeding your mind with noise. Negative thinking doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows from what you consume, what you watch, read, listen to, and surround yourself with. Most people underestimate how powerful this input is. They wonder why they feel anxious, angry, overwhelmed, or insecure, but they never examine the diet of mental junk they take in every day. Just like the body becomes what it eats, the mind becomes what it absorbed. And in today's world, most minds are drowning in noise. Stoicism teaches that you must guard your attention like a fortress. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to waste mental energy on things that do not matter. Seneca criticized people for being everywhere except with themselves. Their message was consistent. Your attention is your most valuable asset, and anything that hijacks it will hijack your peace. Look at your daily environment: constant notifications, message threads, news alerts, ads, drama, gossip, comparison, social media algorithms built to trigger insecurity, outrage cycles designed to make you react. All of this becomes the background soundtrack of your mind. And when that soundtrack is chaotic, your thoughts become chaotic too. Negative thinking thrives in overstimulation because your brain never gets time to reset, reflect, or process. It's always reacting, never observing. Think about how you feel after scrolling for an hour. More tired, more anxious, more judgmental of yourself, more convinced that everyone else is happier, richer, more attractive, or more successful. That isn't an accident. It's the result of feeding your mind noise instead of clarity. When your mind is full of noise, it defaults to fear, comparison, and self-criticism. The Stoic alternative is intentional consumption. Choose what enters your mind the way you would choose who enters your home, with standards, boundaries, and awareness. Curate your digital environment. Unfollow accounts that drain you. Stop reading comment sections that poison your mood. Limit news exposure to essential information. Replace reactive scrolling with intentional learning. Practice digital fasting a day or even an hour without screens. In that silence, your mind recalibrates, space returns, perspective returns, peace returns. When you reduce noise, you increase clarity. You begin hearing your own thoughts again, not the world's. You notice what truly matters. You react less. You choose better. You think more rationally, and your emotional world becomes calmer because it's no longer being pulled in 1,000 directions. The truth is simple. You cannot kill negative thinking while feeding your mind with negativity. The input determines the output. Protect your attention the same way a warrior protects their weapon. Remember this. Guard your attention like treasure. Law 8. Values over emotions. Virtue creates clarity. Negative thinking often takes control when your emotions sit in the driver's seat and your values are pushed into the back. Most people live from emotional impulse. Whatever they feel in the moment becomes their reality. If they feel insecure, they assume they're inadequate. If they feel rejected, they assume they are unworthy. If they feel anxious, they assume danger is coming. Emotions become dictators and the mind becomes a hostage. The Stoics understood how dangerous this is. They believed that a person ruled by emotion is ruled by chaos. But Stoicism offers a different path. Let your values, not your emotions, determine how you interpret the world. Values are stable. Emotions are temporary. Values point you toward who you want to be. Emotions reflect only how you feel right now. When you live from values, you regain clarity. You stop giving temporary feelings permanent power. Think about the conflict between emotions and values in everyday life. Anger tells you to lash out, but your value of wisdom tells you to pause. Fear tells you to avoid discomfort, but your value of courage tells you to step into it. Resentment tells you to hold a grudge, but your value of justice tells you to act with fairness. Impulse tells you to act quickly, but your value of temperance tells you to slow down. When you choose values over emotions, negative thinking loses its fuel. Most negative thoughts are emotional reactions disguised as truths. I'm not enough. People don't care about me. This will never work. These aren't facts, they're feelings. And when you treat feelings as facts, your mind becomes unstable. But when you anchor yourself in values, feelings lose their authority. You don't deny the emotion. You just don't let it decide who you are. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around 4 core virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These weren't abstract ideas. They were practical tools for thinking clearly under pressure. Wisdom guided perspective, courage guided action, justice guided behavior, temperance guided emotional regulation. Together, these virtues created clarity, and clarity destroys negative thinking. Try this simple practice. Choose one virtue and live by it for 24 hours. If you pick wisdom, pause before reacting. If you pick courage, do the difficult thing you've been avoiding. If you pick justice, treat others and yourself with fairness. If you pick temperance, control your impulses. Just one day of living through values can drastically weaken the grip of negativity, because your decisions will no longer come from fear, insecurity, or impulse. This law reminds you of something essential. You are not your emotions. You are the values you choose to embody. Carry this truth with you. When values lead, emotions follow. You've just walked through 8 Stoic laws that can break the cycle of negative thinking. Laws that teach you to question your thoughts, name your emotions, prepare for discomfort, detach from what you can't control, rewrite your internal story, strengthen your discipline, protect your attention, and live from your values instead of your impulses. Each law is simple, but together they form a complete system for building a mind that doesn't collapse under pressure. Now it's your turn to put them into practice. Choose one law today, just one, and live by it for the next 24 hours. Notice how differently a mind responds when you treat thoughts as impressions, not commands. When you pause before reacting, when you choose clarity over fear. Small, consistent practice is what transforms the mind from a battlefield into a place of strength. Thank you for spending this time with me and committing to your inner growth. Your presence here means you're already becoming stronger, clearer, and harder to shake. I'm grateful you stayed until the end, and I hope you carry these principles with you into the days ahead. I'll see you in the next video. Your journey continues.